They say money changes everything, but does it really reveal who we are? Or does it merely set the stage for the secrets we've kept buried all along? This is the true-to-life saga of Maxwell Harrington, a self-made millionaire, and the two women who changed his life forever. One was his devoted pregnant wife, Ariana, who believed in his dreams from day one. The other was Felicia Morgan, a mysterious mistress who crossed boundaries the moment she grabbed his gold-rimmed credit card. What followed was a whirlwind of deception, financial sabotage, and dramatic reckonings no one saw coming. Brace yourself for a heart-stopping tale of betrayal, money, and justice served cold. Maxwell Harrington was no stranger to ambition. He had, after all, built his fortune from scratch, starting with a scrappy marketing agency in his early 20s and expanding into real estate investments that turned him into a multi-millionaire by the time he was 35. Married to Ariana, a former paralegal who supported his hustle from the days of ramen dinners, Maxwell seemed to have it all. Their life was a beautiful tapestry of high-end galas and heartfelt Sunday brunches with close friends. If you looked at any photograph of the couple, you'd see two people who genuinely cared for each other, their eyes lit by shared dreams. Ariana's pregnancy came like a bright star in an already glittering sky. After years of trying, the couple was finally expecting their first child. Maxwell was overjoyed. He wanted a family legacy to pass down, someone to carry forward the Harrington name. And Ariana glowed with the promise of motherhood, envisioning a stable, loving home for their baby girl. But stability is often an illusion. Beneath the surface, Maxwell's hectic lifestyle tugged him in many directions. Late-night meetings, international business calls, and impromptu networking events became his norm. Ariana, initially understanding, began to worry about his constant fatigue, the hollow look in his eyes whenever he rushed from one meeting to another. Then there was Felicia Morgan, a spirited entrepreneur trying to launch her own event planning startup. She'd first crossed paths with Maxwell at an exclusive charity fundraiser for local youth programs. She was there not as a guest, but as part of the event's organizing team. A small conversation about lighting arrangements turned into a long exchange about their mutual passion for business. Maxwell was intrigued by Felicia's energy. She listened to him with rapt attention. There was something intoxicating about her ambition, a reflection of his younger self that he found hard to resist. Late-night coffee chats became routine, although Maxwell assured himself it was all professional lines blurred. One evening, Felicia confided that she had major debts holding her back. Maxwell, driven by his usual generosity, offered financial advice, then over weeks more than just advice. It was a slippery slope. Soon texts flew back and forth at all hours, and Maxwell found himself torn between excitement and guilt. What he didn't realize was that Felicia's desire for success went far beyond what she admitted. She saw Maxwell as a gateway to a life she believed she deserved, and so began the descent into a tangled web of deception. Ariana Harrington's life revolved around nurturing the new life within her. She spent her mornings reading pregnancy books, her afternoons planning nursery designs, and her nights waiting for Maxwell to come home. As the months passed, her belly swelled with promise. Yet she couldn't ignore the growing distance in her marriage. Maxwell was away more often. Business, he claimed, always business. But Ariana was no fool. She worked in a law firm environment before and knew how subtle changes in someone's habits could indicate deeper issues. The suspiciously hushed phone calls, the random late-night texts, the way Maxwell sometimes drifted off in conversation, as though his mind was stuck somewhere else. It all formed a puzzle she dreaded completing. One afternoon, she sought out her old friend John Smith, a reliable family attorney from Redwood City, who had handled some of Maxwell's real estate deals in the past. John knew the Harringtons personally. He'd been to their home for holiday parties and had seen how Ariana always had Maxwell's back even in the toughest of times. She didn't explicitly say she suspected an affair. Instead, she spoke about protecting their assets, especially now that they had a child on the way. John, ever the professional, offered sound advice suggesting prenuptial contract reviews, estate planning, and ways to secure the child's financial future. Ariana nodded, her face taut with anxiety. Across town, Felicia Morgan pushed forward in her budding romance with Maxwell, though she cloaked it under the veil of professional partnership. She invited him to walkthroughs of prestigious event venues, introduced him to potential clients who fawned over his success. Felicia was always by his side, beaming with pride, whenever she introduced Maxwell as her investor. The truth was, she had begun to rely on his steady flow of funds to cover her own expenses. Maxwell, enthralled by the excitement of it all, continued to write checks to back her budding enterprise. Over time, Felicia realized Maxwell's generosity had virtually no limit, at least none she had yet encountered. Feeling emboldened, she made a life-altering decision, one that would send shockwaves through every corner of Maxwell's world. Unbeknownst to him, she quietly memorized one of his credit card numbers one night while he was away from the table, leaving the glossy platinum card on the bar counter. It felt like the final step in claiming the sort of life she believed she was destined for. Ariana carried on at home, unaware of the storm brewing. She had no idea another woman had set her sights not just on her husband's heart, but on his wallet, an audacity that would spark a chain reaction no one could have predicted. It happened in a single audacious moment. Felicia Morgan, flush with confidence, placed an order online for a designer handbag using Maxwell's platinum credit card number. She reasoned it was a small expense compared to his wealth, and besides, wasn't she contributing to his happiness by being his muse, his companion, his source of adrenaline in a monotonous life? The handbag was her reward for all her hard work, or so she justified. Yet the thrill of this deceitful purchase was so intoxicating that she didn't stop at one. Within days, a string of high-end transactions followed: luxury shoes, exclusive skincare products, reservations at five-star hotels for business meetings. Each time, Felicia felt a rush of power. She convinced herself Maxwell wouldn't notice a few $1,000s here or there. After all, he never seemed concerned about finances in general. But Maxwell's longtime accountant, George Whitmore, noticed the discrepancies. George was a meticulous man who had managed Maxwell's accounts for nearly a decade. He believed in accountability, especially given Maxwell's complex financial portfolio. When George spotted unusual spikes in credit card statements, charges that didn't match Maxwell's usual spending patterns, he grew alarmed. Discreetly, he raised the matter with Maxwell. Maxwell initially dismissed it, thinking it might be some business-related purchase he had forgotten about, or Ariana's new nesting expenses for the baby. But a few weeks in, the charges escalated beyond reason. Apprehension twisted in Maxwell's gut. He confronted Felicia, who quickly spun a tale of pressing business obligations, an emergency here, an investment there. Maxwell found himself in a moral quandary. On one hand, he felt betrayed that Felicia had used his personal card without explicit permission. On the other, he was flattered she turned to him for help, reinforcing the unspoken bond they shared. A trembling Maxwell hesitated. Should he cut her off? Or should he keep allowing Felicia to draw from his finances for the sake of preserving their illicit relationship? The rational side of him knew this was wrong. But the emotional side, caught up in Felicia's allure, couldn't break free. He fell deeper into the trap she set, grudgingly allowing. Continued use of the card, albeit within certain limits, they verbally agreed on. Unknown to Maxwell, Ariana had reached a tipping point of her own. She had overheard cryptic phone calls and seen fleeting texts with Felicia's name flashing on Maxwell's phone screen. Though Ariana's heart clenched, her maternal instincts and sense of self-preservation kicked in. She decided she must protect her unborn child at all costs. She contacted John Smith again, inquiring about more aggressive financial safeguards. Something in the air told her she needed to be ready for the worst. Ariana Harrington had always trusted the quiet patterns of her household's finances. Though Maxwell was the one handling investments and meetings with their accountant, Ariana, ever the meticulous former paralegal, reviewed their joint account once a week. It was a quiet habit she rarely spoke of, just one more way she cared for their future, especially now with their baby girl due in a few months. But that morning, something was off. She had just finished breakfast, a bowl of oatmeal she barely touched, when she opened her laptop and logged into the bank portal. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, mindlessly rubbing her growing belly as the page loaded. Her eyes scanned the screen, then froze. A charge for nearly $800 at a luxury salon. In Felicia Morgan's zip code. Ariana stared, her breath catching. It wasn't the amount that stung, it was the name of the establishment. She'd never been there. Never even heard of it until she vaguely recalled Felicia mentioning it in passing at a charity event months ago. Her heart began to hammer. Clicking deeper, Ariana opened the last 3 statements. Page after page of purchases unraveled before her eyes. Boutique hotel reservations, exclusive spas, 5-star restaurant charges, none of which matched their calendar or her memory. A few had Felicia's name scribbled in the memo line. Ariana's breath came in shallow waves. She felt like the floor had vanished beneath her. She printed the statements, her hands trembling, ink smudging slightly from her grip. All at once, the late-night calls. The sudden mood swings, the tired lies, disguised as meetings, they all made sense. Rage and devastation collided in her chest. Her pregnancy hormones intensified every emotion into something volcanic. That night, she waited in lunch. The dinner table was set for 2 baked salmon, sautéed asparagus, and a side of mashed sweet potatoes. The plates remained untouched as she sat still like a storm before eruption. Maxwell walked in just after 7, loosening his tie, looking as though he expected another quiet evening. The moment he saw Ariana's face, he knew. "We need to talk," she said sharply. The air grew thick. Within minutes, the table was covered in printed bank statements. Ariana's voice trembled, but her words were sharp as daggers. "Would you care to explain why someone named Felicia is making luxury purchases with our card? Don't insult me by saying it's for business." Maxwell stuttered, taken off guard. It's complicated." "No, it's actually very simple," Ariana snapped, standing up. "You let your mistress treat our accounts like her own personal piggy bank. While I'm here, carrying your child." Maxwell's eyes fell to the floor. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. She needed help. Help. Ariana laughed bitterly. So now help means designer shoes and hotel rooms. "Tell me, Maxwell, how many nights did you stay in those hotel rooms?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time, he had no smooth justification, no half-truth to fall back on. His silence said it all. Ariana turned away, her hand on her belly, as if protecting her daughter from the ugliness unraveling in their home. "I gave you everything. I stood by you when we had nothing. And now you're handing our future to a woman who saw you as a walking ATM." Maxwell moved toward her, but she stepped back. Her body trembled not from fear, but from a surge of strength she hadn't known she possessed. "Don't," she warned. That night, after Maxwell retreated to his office in defeat, Ariana made a phone call that changed everything. Her voice shook only once at the beginning. "John, it's Ariana. I need you." John Smith, the trusted family attorney who had been like a big brother to her since law school, listened calmly as she explained the situation. "I want every account frozen," she said, her tone resolute. "Not just the joint ones. If there's a way to prevent him from funneling any more money to her, I want it done. Now." John was quiet for a moment. "You're not filing for divorce." "Not yet," Ariana whispered. "But I'm protecting myself and my child." Within 24 hours, emergency legal mechanisms were in motion. Ariana had every right under community property laws and spousal protections to limit access to shared funds if marital misconduct threatened their financial stability. John moved quickly, drafting temporary injunctions, initiating asset transfers into irrevocable trusts, and locking down the family's most liquid holdings. Maxwell found out the next morning when his card was declined at a cafe. Then again, when he tried to wire money to his office payroll account. Then again, when he called George, his accountant, and was met with, "I think you better talk to Ariana." Panic set in. Meanwhile, Felicia walked into an upscale boutique with a confident smile, only to have the platinum card declined in front of 2 sales clerks. She stared at the terminal as though it had betrayed her. "Run it again," she demanded. The second attempt failed too. Felicia left, red-faced, her fingers already texting Maxwell in a frenzy. And back home, Ariana sat in the nursery, staring at the tiny crib they'd bought together. She rested a hand on her swollen belly and whispered, "I will never let anyone take from you what's rightfully yours. Not even your father." The war had begun, and this time Ariana was not afraid to fight. In the aftermath of the financial freeze, Maxwell stood on precarious ground. His business empire, Harrington Enterprises, relied heavily on fluid cash flow. Investors watched with concern as rumors circulated about the sudden paralysis in his accounts. Maxwell scrambled for damage control. He scheduled meetings with key stakeholders to assure them it was a domestic matter, that his finances were still secure and his real estate holdings were intact. Yet the air of panic lingered. Banks don't just freeze accounts for no reason, and word spreads quickly in high net worth circles. Meanwhile, Felicia Morgan was in a panic of her own. She'd built her budding event planning business on the assumption of Maxwell's continued support. Without it, vendors demanded overdue payments. Clients began questioning her reliability. Felicia tried to contact Maxwell repeatedly, leaving desperate voicemails, some tearful, some angry. When she finally managed to corner him outside his office, her voice shook with fury. "You promised to back me. Now you've left me hanging." Maxwell rubbed his temples in frustration. There was no easy solution. His wife Ariana, still reeling from betrayal, had not only frozen their joint accounts, but initiated a review of every financial transaction Maxwell had made in the past 6 months. Her attorneys filed preliminary motions in court, aiming to protect marital assets under the threat of potential divorce proceedings. Amid the chaos, Ariana wrestled with a whirlwind of emotions. She felt betrayed, but also worried for Maxwell's businesses. Above all, she feared the health toll this stress was taking on her unborn child. Late one night, she found herself lying awake, hand resting protectively on her stomach, tears streaming down her face. She recalled her earliest memories with Maxwell scrimping for rent, celebrating their first big investment success with cheap champagne. How did they get here? How could someone so once devoted and loving betray her in such a cavalier way? At that moment, Ariana vowed that if there was any glimmer of hope for her marriage, Maxwell would have to earn it. She couldn't stand by while Felicia, this cunning mistress, threw their lives into turmoil. Ariana decided to schedule a meeting with Felicia. It was a bold move, possibly dangerous for her emotional state, but Ariana felt it was necessary. She needed to look her husband's mistress in the eyes and see exactly what kind of woman had so brazenly hijacked their finances. Maxwell, upon learning Ariana's intention, tried to dissuade her. He wanted to shield Ariana from further stress, but in truth, he feared what Felicia might say. The stage was now set for a tense emotional standoff, a meeting that could either spark the path to redemption or ignite a final destructive conflagration. Ariana chose the cafe with care, a high-end spot tucked discreetly into a tree-lined block in Menlo Park. Elegant but understated, it was a place with soft jazz white marble counters and polished staff who knew better than to interrupt when emotions ran high. She needed neutral territory, not just for safety, but to steady herself. The idea of confronting Felicia Morgan, her husband's mistress, the woman who had siphoned money from their marriage like a parasite, felt surreal. But Ariana wasn't here for a fight. She was here for clarity. She arrived 15 minutes early, dressed with quiet power, in a black maternity dress that hugged her belly, her hair tied back in a no-nonsense bun. No jewelry other than her wedding band. Her makeup was light but sharp. She wasn't there to impress. She was there to send a message. She ordered chamomile tea and took the corner table her back to the wall where she could see the door. Her hands fidgeted over the manila folder, tucked into her purse printed statements, notes from John Smith, highlighted proof of Felicia's audacity. But she hoped she wouldn't need them. She hoped this would be civil. Brief. Surgical. At 11:17 a.m., Felicia arrived. She swept in like a woman used to taking up space wrapped in a powder blue blazer Ariana suspected had been charged to Maxwell's card. Oversized sunglasses obscured her eyes until she pulled them off with one hand, her expression unreadable. She looked Ariana up and down, perhaps expecting someone more fragile, more frayed. Instead, Ariana met her with a gaze that didn't flinch. Felicia approached with a half-smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ariana, you look... well. I'm pregnant, Ariana said plainly. I look how I feel exhausted and betrayed. Felicia slipped into the chair across from her and crossed her legs. Look, I didn't come here to be scolded. Good. I didn't come here to scold, Ariana said, folding her hands. I came to understand how a woman could look another woman in the eye and still justify stealing from her. Felicia scoffed softly, as if offended. I didn't steal anything. Maxwell offered. He didn't offer his credit card. Ariana interrupted. You took it. You memorized the number while he wasn't looking. That's theft, Felicia. Plain and simple. Felicia shifted in her seat. Maxwell knew I needed help. I was trying to build something for myself. He didn't say no when the statements came in. That's not theft, that's consent by silence. Ariana blinked slowly, trying to stay calm. Her heart pounded in her ears, but she kept her tone cool. You really believe that? That just because he didn't stop you fast enough, it was yours to take? Felicia leaned in slightly. Ariana, let's not pretend you and Maxwell are some perfect fairy tale couple. He came to me. He confided in me. You think I seduced him? He was already slipping away. A flash of heat shot through Ariana, but she kept her face neutral. My husband may have lost his way, but you lit the trail. Don't flatter yourself. Felicia straightened jaw tight. Why did you want this meeting, really? You've already frozen the accounts. You've humiliated him. You've destroyed my business. What more do you want? Ariana inhaled deeply. I wanted to see what kind of woman you are. I wanted to look into the eyes of the person who knowingly walked into a marriage and helped rip it apart while pretending it was business. For a moment, the mask cracked. Felicia's confidence wavered. She reached for her cappuccino, which the waiter had placed without them noticing, and took a long sip. Then came the line Ariana would never forget. You're trying to hold on to something that's already slipping through your fingers. You think freezing his accounts and playing the legal card will make him love you again. It won't. If he wanted to stay, he wouldn't have left in the first place. The words hit like a punch, but Ariana didn't react. Not outwardly. She leaned in slightly. I'm not trying to win Maxwell back. I'm trying to protect my child from the fallout of your recklessness. That's the difference between us. You see love as a weapon or a transaction. I see it as a responsibility. Felicia looked away for the first time. Ariana reached into her purse and pulled out a single sheet of paper, an image of a transaction from Maxwell's card, for a $2,500 handbag. This is what you traded your dignity for. You're not building a business, Felicia. You're burning bridges with expensive matches. Felicia's lips parted, but she said nothing. Ariana stood slowly, sliding the paper back into her folder. Her legs trembled, but she forced herself to rise with poise. She looked down at Felicia and said in a voice both calm and cutting, You have days left, maybe weeks. But this ride is ending, Felicia. And when it does, you'll look back and wonder how it all fell apart. Let me save you the suspense. It started the moment you saw another woman's life and decided you deserved it more. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and one more thing if you try to retaliate through media or lawyers. Remember this, I'm a woman with nothing left to lose and everything left to protect. Ariana didn't wait for a response. As she stepped out into the California sun, the heat hit her like a cleansing fire. Her hands shook slightly, and her heart raced, but she kept walking one foot in front of the other. That chapter was closed. Whatever came next, divorce custody chaos, she would meet it head-on. Because the fight wasn't just about a man anymore. It was about a future, and no one was going to steal that from her. Back in his office, Maxwell faced a silent revolt among his own employees. Word had spread that multiple department budgets were locked up because Ariana had effectively frozen the company's primary accounts. Some staffers whispered that Maxwell was distracted by a scandalous affair, while others worried for their job security. The corporate atmosphere grew tense, overshadowing the once celebratory environment, where big deals were closed almost daily. On top of that, Felicia's event planning startup began to crumble. She had leveraged Maxwell's name to secure vendor contracts, but without a steady influx of capital, those arrangements fell through. Angry suppliers threatened legal action. Clients cancelled forthcoming events, refusing to pay Felicia's retainer fees since she no longer had the means to execute the lavish galas she'd promised. Alone in his plush corner office, Maxwell gazed out the panoramic window, watching the city skyline blur into a hazy mosaic. A sense of regret gnawed at him. He replayed every choice, every flirtatious coffee meeting, every hush-hush phone call with Felicia. The guilt pressed on his chest heavy as a stone. For all his business acumen, he had allowed a reckless affair to jeopardize not only his marriage, but also his reputation and the livelihoods of those who worked for him. Desperate for a solution, Maxwell dialed Ariana's number. She answered, her tone icy. He pleaded for a meeting, insisting he wanted to fix things for the baby's sake, if nothing else. Ariana agreed, but only under the condition that John Smith be present. Maxwell hesitated. Involving a lawyer felt like a barrier between them, but Ariana was unyielding. She needed legal protection and emotional distance, a buffer against the heartbreak. They met at John Smith's law office, a place that felt sterile and tense. Ariana looked tired, her hand cradling her baby bump protectively. Maxwell felt a pang of remorse seeing her so worn down. John laid out the terms for unfreezing certain accounts, but demanded full transparency of Maxwell's finances, including all transactions to Felicia. Maxwell had no choice but to comply. The alternative was to watch his empire collapse further. As Ariana listened to the enumerations of Felicia's expenses, each designer purchase, each extravagant meal, she realized just how deeply Maxwell had been financing another woman's lifestyle. Tears of anger and despair welled in her eyes. In that moment, Maxwell saw the depth of the pain he had inflicted upon the woman who had always stood by him. John requested a recess, giving Maxwell and Ariana a moment alone in the conference room. Maxwell reached for Ariana's hand, but she pulled away. The silence was deafening. The fate of their marriage and Maxwell's future hung in the balance, waiting for Ariana's decision. The next day brought an unexpected development. Felicia Morgan showed up at Harrington Enterprises, refusing to leave the building until she spoke to Maxwell. Security tried to deter her, but she caused a scene in the lobby loud enough for curious employees to gather. Eventually Maxwell appeared, his face taut with frustration. He escorted Felicia into a private conference room. There she broke down, tears streaming down her cheeks as she recounted how her fledgling business had all but collapsed. She was being harassed by creditors, and she had no money left to keep her apartment. Felicia demanded Maxwell give her a final severance so she could start over. Her tone, halfway between desperation and threat, suggested she might go public with their affair if he didn't comply. Maxwell was stunned. The woman who once charmed him with her ambition now revealed a manipulative streak far darker than he'd imagined. Backed into a corner, he felt a sudden rush of anger. "This has to end," he hissed. "I've nearly lost my wife, my child, and my business over this. I can't give you any more." Felicia threatened to contact tabloids, threatening to shred his reputation with interviews and leaked messages. Maxwell, mindful of the potential fallout, refused to budge, but did offer a small settlement to ensure Felicia could move out peacefully and drop any blackmail attempts. Little did he know that Ariana, after hearing rumors of Felicia's dramatic arrival, had come to the office to confront Maxwell. She accidentally overheard part of their conversation through the partially open conference room door. As she listened to Felicia's threats and Maxwell's desperate attempt to clean up the mess, Ariana felt both a pang of pity for Maxwell and a hardened resolve to protect herself. When Maxwell exited the room, he found Ariana standing there, her eyes cold yet sad. She turned away without a word, heading for the elevator. Maxwell rushed to follow her, but she was gone before he could explain anything. In that elevator ride down, Ariana thought of all the illusions that had been shattered, the illusions of a perfect marriage, of unwavering loyalty, of untainted success. That evening, Ariana called John Smith and instructed him to move forward with an aggressive legal strategy. She wanted a formal agreement that would ensure financial security for her and her unborn child. She was no longer content with partial measures. Maxwell's pleas for forgiveness and second chances felt hollow. In her mind, actions needed to speak louder than words. While Maxwell grappled with his crumbling personal life, the walls began closing in on Felicia Morgan. She discovered that certain details of her manipulative behavior, like using Maxwell's credit card without explicit permission, could lead to legal repercussions. Moreover, Maxwell's final offer of a settlement was nowhere near the extravagant sum she had hoped for. Fear, anger, and regret churned inside her, driving her to reckless decisions. She confided her troubles in her only close friend, Tara Nguyen, a public relations specialist who once assisted her in event promotions. Tara, upon hearing Felicia's plan to possibly sell her story to the tabloids, warned her that might get you short-term cash, but you'll become persona non grata in this industry. No high-profile client will ever trust you again. Felicia hesitated. She knew Tara was right, yet with unpaid bills piling up, desperation clouded her judgment. At the same time, Maxwell's legal and financial nightmares grew. Ariana's lawyer sent him a draft settlement that was substantially more than just spousal support. It demanded that Ariana become the primary beneficiary of multiple key assets, ensuring she and the baby would be protected. Maxwell's pride was wounded. Everything he'd built might end up under Ariana's control, yet he lacked leverage. He had no moral high ground to stand on. Feeling the immense weight of his choices, Maxwell arranged a sit-down with Ariana this time, without lawyers. In the living room of their once happy home, he confessed his wrongdoing in a halting, remorseful voice. He apologized for betraying her, for jeopardizing their child's future. Ariana listened, arms folded, tears brimming. "I want to trust you," she whispered. "But I can't if you keep Felicia in your life." Maxwell promised it was over. He even showed Ariana the text messages in which he refused Felicia's demands for more money. Over the course of that conversation, Ariana sensed his genuine regret. She allowed a small crack in her fortress of anger, but the road to reconciliation, if any, would be long and uncertain. She left that meeting with a heavy heart, telling Maxwell she needed more time to think and that the current legal arrangements would remain in place until she felt secure. Meanwhile, Felicia took a daring step. She contacted a freelance journalist who specialized in wealthy scandals. Though she stopped short of giving a full tell-all, she hinted she had juicy information about a millionaire's extramarital affairs, shady financial dealings, and a pregnant wife scorned. If the story broke, it could catapult Felicia into the public eye, but it could also backfire spectacularly. The seeds for the next chapter of turmoil had been sown. Amid the swirling rumors, Ariana's health took a downturn. She experienced early contractions one evening and had to be rushed to the hospital. Maxwell, informed by Ariana's distraught mother, abandoned everything to be by her side. Outside the maternity ward, he paced anxiously, haunted by the realization that his reckless actions might be placing Ariana and their child at risk. When Ariana stabilized, the doctors advised strict bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy. Stress was her enemy, they warned, and any emotional upheaval could trigger premature labor. Maxwell felt an overwhelming sense of guilt and responsibility. Watching Ariana lie there, exhausted and tearful, forced him to confront the magnitude of his betrayal. While Ariana recuperated in the hospital, Maxwell took a crucial step. He convened a meeting with his lawyer, George the accountant, and John Smith. He wanted to expedite any documents necessary to ensure Ariana's financial security immediately. Whether they stayed together or not, she and the baby would want for nothing. John, though skeptical of Maxwell's change of heart, agreed to set up a trust fund that protected Ariana and the child accessible only by Ariana's signature. Maxwell also insisted that once Ariana and the baby were healthy and safe, he would return all joint funds to her oversight. John drafted the paperwork, and Maxwell signed an act of contrition that carried considerable weight. In a parallel move, Maxwell decided to go on the offensive with Felicia. Through his lawyer, he sent a cease and desist letter warning her against making any defamatory statements or attempting blackmail. He also demanded reimbursement for any unauthorized transactions she had placed on his card, threatening civil action if she did not comply. Felicia, enraged, saw her once lucrative fling transform into a nightmare of legal threats. And then came the unexpected. Felicia discovered she too was pregnant. Shock and terror washed over her in equal measure. She wasn't sure if Maxwell was the father, but if he was, it could change everything. Confusion gnawed at her. Was this a stroke of luck that might restore Maxwell to her side, or was it yet another layer of complication that would destroy them both? As she wrestled with this new development, Maxwell and Ariana's lives inched forward cautiously. Ariana remained in the hospital, battling both her physical and emotional frailties. Maxwell lingered at her bedside, torn between his guilt and a glimmer of hope. He dreamed of redemption, but the looming specter of Felicia, now harboring a potentially life-altering secret, threatened to upend everything once again. Felicia Morgan's possible pregnancy became the catalyst for a whole new wave of tension. She debated whether to inform Maxwell immediately or wait until she had concrete proof. A part of her considered the child as a bargaining chip. Another part dreaded the wrath that might follow. Ultimately, she decided she needed confirmation first. An appointment was scheduled at a nearby clinic where she discovered that she was indeed pregnant. The gestational timeline suggested a high likelihood that Maxwell was the father. Desperate for advice, Felicia confided in Tara Nguyen once more. This time, Tara's counsel was unequivocal. Don't even think about using this child as leverage. If you're going to raise a baby, do it right. A scandal or blackmail could destroy both you and your baby's future. Felicia listened, tears forming in her eyes. She felt trapped by her own ambitions, ones that had led her into a complicated, painful entanglement. Meanwhile, Ariana's hospital stay continued as doctors monitored her condition. Maxwell never left her side for long. He slept in a chair by her bed, held her hand whenever she woke from restless slumber, and read baby books out loud to her in a shaky voice that betrayed his own nerves. For the first time in a long while, he seemed to rediscover the man Ariana had initially fallen in love with, a man of tenderness, not pride. Ariana, exhausted, grappled with internal conflict. Part of her wanted to give Maxwell another chance, especially now that he'd taken steps to secure her future. Yet every time she closed her eyes, she saw images of Felicia spending their money, mocking her at the cafe, or demanding more from Maxwell. The betrayal felt like a cold dagger lodged in her chest, and she wasn't sure it could ever be fully removed. Amid this delicate truce, Felicia's bombshell text arrived on Maxwell's phone. "We need to talk. I'm pregnant." Maxwell's face drained of color as he stared at the screen. He carefully exited Ariana's hospital room and placed a call to Felicia. Her voice was trembling. She revealed she was about 7 weeks along. Maxwell's mind reeled. Ariana was in her 3rd trimester, nearly ready to deliver. The timing felt painfully ironic. 2 pregnancies, 2 entirely different contexts, and one man caught in the middle. Fear flooded Maxwell's thoughts. How would Ariana react? Would this finally destroy any chance of salvaging their marriage? And what about Felicia? Would she weaponize this pregnancy, or would she attempt to handle things quietly? One thing was clear. No matter what he wanted, another life was at stake. He had to step up, or he risked failing not just Ariana and his unborn child, but Felicia's as well. The revelation of Felicia's pregnancy came like a thunderbolt. Maxwell, in a daze, found himself juggling 2 crises. On one side lay Ariana, fragile, hospitalized, and deeply hurt. On the other side, Felicia, desperate, pregnant, and prone to drastic measures. Feeling cornered, Maxwell confided in his close friend and business partner, Marcus Reynolds. Marcus had known Maxwell since their college days, and was one of the few people Maxwell trusted implicitly. Over a tense conversation in Maxwell's office, Marcus exclaimed, "Man, this is beyond complicated. But you need to be honest with Ariana. Even if it breaks her heart, she deserves to know." Maxwell nodded, guilt tightening around him like a vice. Summoning every ounce of courage, Maxwell returned to the hospital. Ariana was propped up by pillows reading a brochure about newborn care. He sat beside her and gently held her hand. Slowly, he told her everything, that Felicia was pregnant, that he wasn't 100% certain it was his, but the timeline suggested it might be. He expected an outburst or tears, but Ariana's reaction was eerie calm. She listened, closed her eyes for a moment, and then said, "I can't do this right now. Please just let me rest." That night, Ariana barely slept. She stared at the tiled ceiling, fear and fury twisting in her mind. The next morning, she contacted John Smith to see if any new legal provisions could be put in place if Felicia indeed had Maxwell's child. John explained that the legal waters could get murky, especially with paternal rights, child support, and custody. Ariana felt her world spinning out of control again. Meanwhile, Felicia wasn't handling things well. She oscillated between defiance and despair. She considered telling the tabloids about her pregnancy, but Tara's cautionary words echoed in her mind. In a rare moment of introspection, Felicia recognized that going public now wouldn't solve her problems. It would only drag more innocent people into the chaos, including the potential child she carried. Eventually, Felicia agreed to meet with Maxwell again, this time with no pretense of blackmail or demands for exorbitant sums. She merely wanted clarity. Would Maxwell be involved if the child turned out to be his? And what would that mean for Ariana? Maxwell made no promises except one. He would take a paternity test as soon as medically feasible, and if the baby was his, he'd provide support. But in the back of his mind, Maxwell knew that no matter how honorable his intentions were, now, he might already have lost the one thing he valued most, Ariana's trust and love. All he could do was wait and see if time and fate offered any path to redemption. As the weeks passed, Ariana was discharged from the hospital under strict instructions for bed rest at home. She returned to a house that felt both familiar and alien. The nursery remained decorated in soft pastel hues, a hopeful sign of the new life soon to arrive. Yet every corner of the home seemed haunted by memories of betrayal. Maxwell moved into a guest room at Ariana's insistence. Their interactions were polite but distant. He took care of chores, managed her medications, and tried to ensure she had minimal stress. Yet the unspoken tension between them lay like a chasm. The only thing keeping them together was their shared concern for the baby's imminent arrival. One afternoon, Ariana's mother, Helena, came to visit. Helena was a warm, comforting presence, and Ariana found temporary solace in her mother's familiar embrace. Helena spoke frankly. "I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that life's too short to live in bitterness. Whether you forgive Maxwell or not, focus on your health and the baby's." Ariana sobbed into her mother's shoulder, torn between lingering affection for Maxwell and the acute sting of his betrayal. In another part of town, Felicia coped with morning sickness and a mounting sense of isolation. She'd cut ties with most of her professional contacts, humiliated by her downfall. She seldom left her small apartment, which she could barely afford. Maxwell's minimal financial assistance helped with prenatal vitamins and checkups, but nothing more substantial was set in stone until a paternity test confirmed the child's father. Eventually, Felicia scheduled the paternity test for when she was far enough along. Maxwell complied, slipping out from Ariana's watchful eye for the hospital visit. Days afterward, the results arrived by courier at Felicia's doorstep. Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope, scanning the lines of text that would either tether her to Maxwell forever or release her from his life. The result: 99.9% probability of paternity. Maxwell was the father. Shaken, Felicia called Maxwell immediately. He answered, bracing himself. When she confirmed the result, he felt both dread and duty. He had no choice but to inform Ariana, and the mere thought of that conversation made his stomach churn. The reality that he would soon have 2 children, one within a marriage on the verge of collapse, and another with a mistress he was no longer sure he even liked, was almost too much to bear. News of the confirmed paternity set the final gears of fate into motion. Life was about to become more complicated than any of them had ever imagined. It was 3 days before Ariana's due date when Maxwell delivered the dreaded news. Felicia's paternity test confirmed the baby was his. Ariana listened in stunned silence, her face pale. She pressed a trembling hand against her belly, as if to shield her unborn daughter from the heartbreak unfolding. The emotional toll proved too much. She went into labor prematurely that very night, her body racked by contractions that came in fierce waves. Panicked Maxwell rushed Ariana to the hospital. The hours that followed were a blur of bright lights afore drips and encouraging nurses. Ariana's labor was complicated by her high blood pressure, but after a grueling night, she delivered a baby girl, Mia Harrington. The moment Maxwell held his daughter, a seismic shift occurred in his heart. A wave of unconditional love washed over him, followed by overwhelming remorse. He made a silent promise to his newborn child. He would be a better man. Yet the miracle of birth did not erase the heavy realities beyond the hospital walls. Once Ariana stabilized, Maxwell gently asked if she would allow him to put Mia's name on the birth certificate. Ariana agreed. Despite her anger and pain, she knew Maxwell was still the father of her child. She watched him hold Mia with a mixture of sorrow and longing, aware that he might soon be holding another baby in another hospital with another woman. Back at Felicia's apartment, the finality of her pregnancy weighed on her. She was due in 5 months, and with the paternity test results, She suddenly had legal grounds to demand child support. Yet the last thing she wanted was another battle. She saw how Ariana's health had suffered, and for the first time she felt genuine empathy. "Maybe I should just leave," she told Tara during a tearful conversation. Tara, trying to be supportive, said, "If you do it for the right reasons, your baby's well-being, not just to run from guilt." In the days following Mia's birth, Ariana's resolve hardened in one direction. She asked Maxwell to move out. She wanted space to heal, to figure out her next steps, without the daily reminder of betrayal. Maxwell complied, renting a small penthouse suite across town. He visited Mia regularly, but never overstayed his welcome. Each visit was painful yet precious. He yearned for Ariana's forgiveness, but the distance in her eyes told him that his penance was only beginning. Outside the hospital window, life went on. Traffic, bustled people laughed in cafes, and the world spun oblivious to the private chaos of 3 intertwined lives. Somewhere in that chaos, Maxwell clung to hope that one day Ariana would see a man worthy of redemption. But for now, the harsh consequence of his affair and the unborn child with Felicia defined the grim reality he couldn't escape. Weeks turned into months, and life settled into a strained pattern. Ariana focused on caring for Mia, finding solace in the tender innocence of her newborn. She hired a part-time nanny to help when the demands of single-handed motherhood became too great. Meanwhile, Maxwell juggled fatherhood visits damage control within Harrington Enterprises and Felicia's pregnancy. Despite all the turmoil, Ariana's legal arrangements had ensured she was financially secure. The accounts were partially unfrozen, with a significant portion now under her sole control, and a trust set aside for Mia's upbringing. Harrington Enterprises survived the scandal, though its reputation took a hit among certain circles. Maxwell, chastened by the ordeal, poured himself into rebuilding goodwill with clients and employees alike. He even publicly acknowledged his personal issues, though he never went into detail. Felicia gave birth to a boy, Elijah, 5 months later. The delivery was relatively smooth, and Maxwell arrived at the hospital not out of love for Felicia, but out of obligation to his newborn son. Holding Elijah, he felt the same paternal awe he had with Mia, an unbreakable bond. But no matter how strongly fatherhood pulled at his heartstrings, he couldn't deny the cold silence between him and Felicia. She seemed distant, her eyes filled with regret. Perhaps realizing that even motherhood couldn't magically fix the fractured relationships or her tarnished reputation. A quiet agreement emerged. Maxwell would support Elijah financially, ensure he had every opportunity in life. Felicia, for her part, would not push for further interference in Maxwell's affairs or Ariana's domain. She contemplated moving out of state to start anew, which might allow all parties involved a chance at healing in their own way. In the ensuing months, Ariana gradually found her footing as a mother. She remained cordial with Maxwell, allowing him regular visits with Mia. Yet their marital status hung in a delicate balance. Ariana wasn't sure if she could ever fully forgive him, nor was she certain about pursuing a divorce. They attended a few counseling sessions, but the emotional scars ran deep. It would take a tremendous effort, and perhaps a miracle for them to rebuild. As for Felicia, she quietly slipped out of the social scene. Rumor had it, she moved to a small town in Northern California, living off a modest child support payment, and trying her best to provide for Elijah in a fresh environment. The hush of her departure was a stark contrast to the brazen steps that once set this entire saga in motion. For Maxwell Ariana and Felicia Karma had played its course, swift, brutal, and unrelenting. Each was left with a piece of the wreckage, and a chance, however slim, to forge a different future. The question remained, would they ever find true peace, or would the ghosts of their choices linger indefinitely? In the end, all three paid a steep price for their roles in this tumultuous affair. Ariana, betrayed yet strong, discovered a reservoir of resilience she never knew she possessed. Maxwell, humbled and contrite, learned that true wealth lies not in bank accounts, but in the relationships we nurture. And Felicia, once intoxicated by power and material gain, found herself rethinking what success and happiness truly mean. This roller coaster saga of love, betrayal, and cold financial retaliation reminds us that actions carry consequences beyond what we can see in the moment. It's a cautionary tale. Building a life on deceit may yield instant gratification, but the eventual price is almost always higher than we can afford. If you found this story compelling, please give the video a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas and eye-opening tales. Your support keeps us going.